morning, it's Friday the 17th of May and this is the Climate Alarm Clock. In this week's headlines, the world's climate scientists are in despair. Are we all doomed? EV sales have slowed in Ireland and we look at how that's connected to climate misinformation. And Ireland steps up to play a leadership role to get the nature restoration law implemented. Hello and welcome to the Climate Alarm Clock, your Irish climate news podcast. I'm Anna Pringle and today for our dose of doom and gloom, I'm joined by Ciara Daly again. Hello, Ciara.
Do not correlate my name with doom and gloom if you don't mind.
Okay, sorry about that. And we don't have Dara Wynne with us today because he went on slow travel and hasn't come back. So we think he may be on a boat somewhere in the Bay of Biscay, but we're not sure. But instead of Dara, we've got Tom Spencer joining us. And Tom is famous from irishevs.com and also a regular contributor to this podcast. Tom, it's great to have you back.
Morning. Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be back. Excited to be here.
Good. What have you been up to since we last saw you?
Oh, all sorts of trouble, all sorts of good trouble, I hope.
Lobbying
the
the
usual
government.
trying to
More
annoy the right
cars.
people and
Keeping an eye on misinformation anyway, I noticed.
yeah, trying our best. There's a lot of it out there, a lot of greenwashing, and I think people still need a lot of help trying to differentiate between what's real and what's not, and still trying to do my best to help there.
Good man, Tom, and we're here to be real. Okay, now, as
Okay,
always, if you would like to buy us a coffee, you can do that on buymeacoffee.com, the Climate Alarm. And it was great to see we got some lovely comments again this week. So someone unknown bought us some coffees and said, great to have us back. And then, Ciara, you noticed another nice comment.
Yes, this is one of the benefits of Dara being killed off from the podcast. I get to read the comments. So we got a lovely comment from Claire who said, the work that you are all doing to inform, educate and empower others to take action on climate change is fantastic. You have certainly inspired me to get involved and I have no doubt that it is the same for others. Never underestimate the ripple effect of what you do and keep up the great work. Well, thank you very much, Claire.
Yeah, I just loved seeing that comment, and it really is all about the ripple effect, isn't it? And keeping up conversations. And we've talked about that a lot, about how having those conversations with people can make a difference. And that's really what the podcast is all about. So thanks, Claire, for that comment. It's great to know you're listening. Okay, so for our first story, and this one really is kind of doomy. So The Guardian surveyed lead authors of the IPCC reports, and about half replied. So they've got 380 climate scientists, and these are like the most informed people, the climate experts, replied to their survey, and they asked them for their views on whether we are on track to hit or to stay at 1.5 degrees of warming and how they were feeling about that. And the results were kind of depressing, to be honest. So just to run through a few of them, 77% of the scientists believe global temperatures will reach at least 2.5 degrees centigrade above pre-industrial levels. Almost half, 42%, think it'll be more than 3 degrees. And only 6% think the 1.5 degree limit will be achieved.
Well,
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So they're more negative than we are, and they're the scientists.
Yeah. So the IPCC, this from my memory of, I don't know when we started doing our IPCC coverage, maybe 2 years ago. These are the guys who are looking at all of the kind of scientific studies that are done on climate change. They're their job is to examine what the evidence is, like really get into the nuts and bolts of it, make sure that it's all kind of accurate. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, they're sponsored by the United Nations, and it's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. So it's the scientists who contribute to it are all the leading climate scientists from around the world. And what they're doing is looking at all the existing and available evidence to produce the IPCC reports. So they're not doing new research, but they're looking at what's out there and reviewing all the evidence to come up with the reports. So so they're very credible people.
So it's kind of not really surprising either that they would be so despondent in response to that question. Like if that's what their job is, to literally get into the nitty gritty of the bad projections we are looking down the line at.
Well, it's really cool to actually hear scientists talk so
Yeah.
honestly and about feelings as well, because we kind of get these science robots who, they're sort of usually modulating what they're telling us. They're very sort of controlled. But I think one of the other things that's really interesting is the IPCC reports sort of take two forms. There's the pre-publication version where we get to see the notes that kind of come in, but the actual IPCC reports that we see are the ones that have been had input from politicians and from lobbying groups and all these people. So this is an opportunity to hear from scientists without any sort of mediator in the middle, sort of
Yeah.
changing things a little bit. So we are actually getting that properly for the first time, this like actual view untempered from the people that know climate science better than anyone.
Can you remind me then what, I suppose, what is it that they are feeling so despondent about? Like, what are the effects? What are the reports saying? Just like a brief kind of run through.
Well, one of the points is that we're currently, I think, at about 1.4 degrees centigrade of warming, and the Paris Agreement committed countries to not going beyond 1.5 degrees,
Okay.
and that being the upper limit of what they thought was.
What humans could manage.
Yeah, exactly. So even at 1.4 degrees, we're now seeing, increased storms, extreme weather, etc. If you get up to, so, one of the scientists, Peter Cox from the University of Exeter, he commented that, look, climate change is not going to suddenly become dangerous at 1.5. It already is dangerous.
Yeah.
And he said, if we pass 2 degrees, in his view, it won't be game over, but it will be very, very bad. So the higher it goes, the more extreme weather, the more sea level rise, biodiversity and ecosystems are destroyed. Food security, which we're already starting to see as an issue, becomes even more of an issue, and human health is impacted. So it's not really known how many people have already died in heat waves and are dying in heat waves. There was a massive heat wave in Asia in the last month or so, and they don't know how many people died in that heat wave, but people do die in heat waves, which it's just not counted that much.
Yeah.
So there's massive impact, and the higher the rise, the higher the impact.
Can I actually, in looking at this story, I actually did come across some figures about the impact of heat waves. It was saying that, what was it? That one of the stories that you had shared with us was that summer 2023 was the hottest in the last 2,000 years, which is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've been talking about was the impact that heat waves are taking on death tolls, I suppose. Heat waves accounted for more than 150,000 deaths in 43 countries. And so that was each year between 1990 and 2019. So each year 150,000 people were dying because of heat waves. So it was likening it was 1%, accounting for 1% of global deaths, which was essentially what the effect of the pandemic had actually caused as well.
Yeah.
So it's really serious, but it's just not, I suppose, being publicized in the appropriate way by our media, I guess.
Yeah, and that's probably undercounted.
Yeah.
Here, because there's who knows how many people are having heart attacks or whatever because of heat.
Yeah.
As well, so it's probably undercounted.
I think the real frustration here is that these scientists have spent the last 30 years sort of starting off with not quite a whisper, but a low level of please pay attention. It's 30 years later. Our CO2 levels are now higher than they've been in the last 14 million years. And that's crept up and crept up.
It's the
In fact, the
highest
last
ever.
12
Yeah.
months is the highest increase in CO2 we've ever seen. And what are we doing about it? Nothing. So I think anyone doing their job, when you kind of go to your boss and go, here's this thing, can we do something about it? That they've spent 30 years sort of not being listened to, and that's this frustration for them. And
Yeah.
they can see
And
what's
I think
coming. They
that's where
know
the
what's
emotion
coming.
is coming from, because one of the things the Guardian did, which is probably unusual, is they asked the scientists what their feelings about it, and they're coming out with words like hopeless and broken and worried and terrified. And then I love one comment was, "We live in an age of fools." I might make that my motto, actually.
So why did they give that? Why? Well, what's that got to do? What's Age of Fools got to do with anything? Why are they saying? What's the cause? Obviously, we know what the cause of climate change is, but what's the cause of climate change being allowed to happen? did they say in this report?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the reason they're feeling that way is because of their frustration, because the science is being ignored, and so so a lack of political will was blamed by almost 3/4 of the scientists, and then 60% also blamed vested corporate interests, such as our beloved fossil fuel industry. So they're very clearly saying politics and industry are failing us. They're not paying attention to the science.
Question, is it the role of a scientist to be sharing, like their job is to look at the scientific causes? Are they stepping outside the remit of what they should be saying by placing the blame on the poor little corporate interests like the fossil fuel industry?
Yeah, well, it's a very good question. And like, there's been some negative reactions to this report from The Guardian, and actually quite a lot, and some from scientists. And some people are saying, oh, it's doomerism, and doomerism is self-defeating and whatever. But other people are saying then that scientists shouldn't be stepping out of their lane, that they're not social scientists, they're not politicians, and they should stick to the hard science. So I think it's an interesting point. Catherine Hayhoe, who's a climate scientist herself, she wrote a really interesting response to it. And, one of the things she says is our opinions are, as in the scientists, are not the ones that matter. She said, we're highly informed on certain aspects of the science, but we're not the experts in politics and social change. And, she said, why aren't they out asking, politicians or asking business leaders these questions? Because that's who you need to know what they feel about these things. So it's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
There was also a really great companion piece that talked immediately about here's actually what you can do
Yeah.
to not fall into that doomer sort of trap of it's all lost, let's give up now. And actually that Catherine Hayhoe thing, there's this maturity or growing maturity around this idea of what a doomer is. She talks about sort of 3 categories. One is that sort of willful nihilist.
But
It's all gone.
let's not do anything.
Like these are typically sort of like white privileged wealthy people typically in the global north who are just sort of kind of misrepresenting the science. She said there's a sort of second group which is sort of they're not as cynical as the first group, but they still sort of fall into that misinformation trap, and it's sort of about delaying action still and not really having accountability. And that third one, which is the really interesting one that she says, look, this is probably where the scientists in the Guardian report are, is feeling really lonely with your knowledge. They despair because the rest of the world, especially those in power, are acting as though it's business as usual. And I think that's really interesting because the kind of key takeaway from this is climate anxiety is really lonely. And actually what we need to do is find communities and find action together. And that gives us that sort of hope to keep going. I think like this podcast, we're talking about heavy stuff, but hopefully for the listeners at home, or I hope certainly for us at least, it's sort of this unburdening by talking.
You can tell Tom didn't listen to the last podcast when I was having an absolute breakdown.
I got great reviews on that one, Ciara, so don't worry.
Great, I'll just do that every week, so...
But no, I think that's exactly right. And the other thing to keep in mind is that newspapers always and media always focus on the negatives, but I think almost every single scientist said there's still action to be taken, there's still work to be done, and every 0.1 of a degree matters. So it still matters to take action and to try to stop this. So that, it has to. It's not. They're not saying, "Oh, give up. We're doomed. Give up." So. And then Catherine Hayhoe, I thought she had a nice point. She said that. So why should you take action? And she said the main reason for any little human like us to take climate action. Is that not any one person is going to make a noticeable difference to global emissions, but doing these things is going to make a noticeable difference to you. So you will benefit from trying to take direct action, communicating, stop eating beef, stop flying, take carbon out of your transportation, electrify your home, whatever you can do. And if you do some things, you will feel better yourself. And she said, and I thought, and also as Tom, as you just said, you'll build a sense of community as well. So I think, so even though it's a doom and gloom story, I'm taking some positives out of that.
Even though it is, what they're saying is quite depressing, it is reassuring to hear people who are the experts share their feelings on it. I deal in feelings, not facts.
Yeah. And actually an interesting kind of parallel that I came across Rachel Donald, who's a journalist with Planet Critical. It's a great podcast if anyone wants to listen. But she wrote a story this week about going to speak to a private aviation conference in Switzerland. And she was invited as kind of the alternative voice in the room. And she got heckled from the stage, and she got criticized by some of the economists there. But she told them, your assets are going to be worthless in 20 years when all this, starts to fall apart and whatever. But afterwards, she said, there was a dinner and there was drinks and whatever. And she said, so many people came up to her and said, yeah, we agree with you.
Yeah.
We're in this room as representatives of this industry, but we agree with you. But it's the people above us who are making us keep doing this. And they thanked her for speaking up on the stage. So these are people working in private aviation, which is one of the most useless polluting industries out there. So it's a really interesting point. And you're kind of like, how do you get those people to start saying that publicly, though, or start saying it in a way where they're not afraid to say it? Because that will turn things.
Well, I think it's things like this happening. Seeing, like for me, we've all heard these stories, like the facts about climate change for years and years and years. But it was only actually that I started having conversations with Dara and other friends of ours where they were talking about how they were genuinely afraid, that I started listening to it. And I was like, oh, I'm actually afraid too. And then when I had permission to be from people who I see as being quite measured and being quite pragmatic and logical in life, when I had permission from them, not permission, but when I had the example of them telling me that they were afraid and they were scared, I kind of gave myself permission to admit that too. And, there was a period there it was really uncomfortable. And I clearly still have periods where I get really uncomfortable about it and you start to freak out and you're like, what is the point? But then when you get over that, and you do get over that, you actually find this group of people who have a very similar mindset to you and who are trying to change that because they care about the impact on people and the planet. And you're reminded, oh yeah, the world isn't this horrific, awful place that we are portrayed it is by the media. There are people out there who are really genuine and really care. And maybe some of that care might be misdirected and their actions might not align with what I think they should be doing. But overall, it is really impactful to have people like this in such a position of knowledge and power and expertise say, I'm afraid. I don't know. Sorry, scientists, but I find it as a positive story. You've made me feel better about myself.
Oh, good. That's an achievement this week.
Yeah. I'm like a new human this week.
We were all at that climate psychology conference in Dublin last year. And one of the points that was made was climate anxiety is a mentally healthy response to the climate emergency.
Yeah.
Like you're worrying because you kind of should be worried a little bit. And you can often feel sort of put upon like you're the weird one who constantly brings this sort of taboo thing up. And actually, there was a really great article this week that I think crosses over with all of this. Jessica Wildfire, who's in a publication called OK Boomer. I saw it on Twitter. It was shared by George
Great name
Monbiot.
for someone in climate change.
She talked about this thing called spontaneous trait transfer. So the really short version is you end up sort of guilty by association. If you're the person that sort of wakes people up to the climate emergency or any other issue, they sort of end up making you the problem. You're the problem for speaking up. Rachel Donald, the problem for speaking up, whoever it is. And Anna, I know there was a line in this that you really enjoyed, particularly, which was in her article. She said, you often have to trick people into doing the right thing. It's exhausting. It takes a lot out of you to be respectful to idiots all day long.
Well, it's not very respectful to talk about people as idiots. So, but yes, I did like that line.
Anna, you would never speak badly of anybody.
I would never say it in public. We're not in public here, are we? Oh, Lord. So that was a great article. And it was basically saying that if you're the one who's saying we're doomed, then you're a doomer, or if you're the one it's when people say, oh, you're overreacting. And it's like all that bot stuff you see on Twitter or whatever, where people are going, oh, you're making this up. And it's just, and that's putting it in a psychological way like that really, was insightful. I saw people like George Monbiot going, no, this makes me feel better. It helps me explain why people called me the bad guy for so long, So yeah, it was very good, very good. We will put links to some of these articles in the show notes for people who might want to read a little bit more. So I think we should probably, anything else on that story, or will we move on?
I think let's drive on to the next one.
Okay.
Pun intended.
I will just finish on a positive, though, and one of the scientists who
You've
said
ruined
that.
my pun.
Oh, sorry. You can do it again in a minute. But on the positive, one of the scientists who said that one thing that helps him is remembering how much progress has happened since he started to work on this in 2005. So we are making progress, and it is still useful to continue the fight. So, Ciara, do you want to do that pun again now? Or is it too late? Is it
I
lost?
think the moment's gone.
Oh, sorry. So we are going to, speaking about political will and big fossil fuel interests and so on, we are going to, I think, probably touch on those in our next story too, which is about electric vehicles and maybe some misinformation, Tom, that you have spotted recently.
Yeah, my two favourite soapboxes to get on: misinformation and electric cars. I think there's a
But you
lot
love when they intersect, do you?
love is a really strong
Anna.
word. It interests me, definitely. There's such a big crossover, I think, with the first story. There's this sort of obvious inaction on emissions, but also like that protecting of corporate vested interest that we talked about. And I think what's really interesting is actually, I think we're seeing the emergence of a new culture war around electric cars here in Ireland in the same way as we've seen about culture wars on agriculture and other sort of climate action issues. So I guess the context is we're way off target for our transport emissions reductions for 2030. We're just not meeting our expectations. 87% of all the new cars sold this year are entirely reliant on fossil fuels, and they will be for the rest of their lifetime. So, like, the typical car has a life expectancy of about 13 years, and we just don't have the carbon budget to keep locking in all these new emissions. Now, usual caveat, electric cars aren't the silver bullet. We totally need public transport and active travel. But this is such an easy opportunity for us as a country to decarbonise, and transport is our second biggest source of emissions. And really, one of the issues, obviously, one of the reasons we've seen a decline is the cut in government grants for EVs. They cut them last July, and we saw like an immediate and rapid decline in EV sales. And sort of there's no real explanation or transparency on why they did this or what they're going to do about it. And everywhere else seemingly is having a boom in EV sales. So that's a big issue. But I think really one of the big things that's not being talked about is the misinformation about electric cars. So a couple of quick examples from sort of the media recently. An RTE piece that was talking about the rise in the cost of petrol and diesel, which, by the way, totally fails to mention the climate crisis at all. Like, the most important context for fossil fuel prices was ignored. But the journalist in this article, he mentions this supposed trend of people leaving EVs and going back to petrol and diesel cars, which there is no data, nothing to support. And when I challenged him on this, he told me a few friends had told him this was the case. So our national
Wow.
broadcaster is using hearsay.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, like, when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, that is like journalistic malpractice.
Yeah. And look, RTE isn't the only one doing it. There was the Eye had a whole piece on this supposed trend recently. I got in touch with the company that had provided the data that this whole story was built around. They told me two really interesting things. One, they pulled together the data specifically at the behest of the journalist, which tells you a lot about their intention from the outset. And secondly, it was based on 171 car sales in the UK, which is such a tiny amount. It's like so small you can't extrapolate a trend. And this has a huge impact. You know, like yesterday's an Irish Times article which talks about 1 in 6 in the US have run out of charge in their car, but it doesn't talk about how many people in the US run out of petrol and diesel every year, which is not insignificant.
I know, yeah. It's like throw out a stat here without any context or any reference to other stats, and the US public charging network is terrible compared to here.
Yeah, and 16% is not a huge number really to base a whole thing on. And like we're seeing, like there is already this sort of issue with climate literacy anyway. There was a ESRI report that came out earlier this week. And 20% of people in Ireland said they didn't think their car was a big part of their carbon footprint. And even more said that they weren't willing to cut the number of journeys they take in order to lower emissions. So what we've got is this issue of climate literacy meeting journalism that's like actively making the situation worse by promoting misinformation. Or, the Irish Times piece is written by a journalist who has kind of fallen on those core tenets of denial, which are like fear, uncertainty, and doubt that we see time and time again. So it's this really big issue that's not really being paid any attention to, and unless we kind of nip these culture wars in the bud, they just get bigger and bigger.
How do we do that? Nice, easy question.
I think for me, the first thing we can do is call it out. It's about holding journalists or their platforms accountable. So, like, I don't think there is a TV station, a radio station, a newspaper in Ireland that hasn't platformed someone with an obvious vested interest. We get tech bros talking about EVs, but they don't care about the climate crisis. They're for bigger data centers. We see car dealers who are regularly platformed who, when you look at it, weren't selling EVs anyway. They sell typically to high-end people who already have high emissions. They want Bentleys or big Audis or whatever. So, like, their bias is kind of inherent. But unless we call out the journalist and say, the RTE journalist, when I asked him, what evidence do you have for this? He put it on me and said, what evidence do you have to disprove this? But we don't have
you're
to
not the
disprove
journalist.
lies.
You haven't just put. I mean, he's just put this out on public, like national public media. He has to be able to back up his evidence. You don't have to. You're asking a question.
Definitely. And like the other aspect of this that has completely gone under the radar is the role of car companies themselves in this. There's an amazing study out this week, or amazing for me, it might not be for others, which looks at the role of car companies in sabotaging the EV transition. So it looks at 15 of the biggest car manufacturers and their role in sort of anti-EV lobbying. But it's not just that. Like, we've seen that systematically they've got rid of the number of models available. It's really hard to find a small car, whether it's petrol or electric or otherwise. They're offering only massive SUVs, which like overconsume energy, overpollute, are significantly more deadly on our roads. And we're not really holding anyone accountable. Car journalists care about cars. There's this big petromasculinity thing. There's no one, it sort of falls in those gaps. Are EVs tech? Are they cars? Are they climate? And each group sort of rejects and accepts them in the way that they want. And it's getting kind of problematic.
I mean, one of the things that strikes me is how much these challenges get out there in the water almost. Like, I have a friend tell me, but EVs, they go on fire more often. I go, no, they don't. It's,
they what?
They go on fire. They're more likely to go on fire. As like, but this is something that's been covered in the media, or the whole thing about EVs and minerals, and you need more mineral, and that the carbon footprint of an EV is higher because you need to go and find minerals in Congo or whatever. Which yes, it does consume materials, but I think I forget the stat now. But I think an EV, it takes maybe 2 years of driving for it to have exceeded or saved itself. Sorry, I'm not saying that very well, but for the carbon footprint to be less than a regular car, so I mean, but the sound bites, it's like all of this misinformation, the sound bites travel, and people. So that point you're making, Tom, about people are switching back from EVs. That's out there now. Even though it's not true. I know a lot of EV drivers, and I'm one myself, and I don't know anybody who would go back.
Well, even that article from the Irish Times, it's all about, I suppose, how the journalist has framed that story. I have it open now, and like some of the information in there is really positive. The headline is that almost 1/6 of EV drivers have range anxiety, essentially. But like, if you just flip that on its head, that means 5/6 of EV drivers don't have range anxiety. And so like, you can just totally reframe it. And then when you actually get into the body of it, it says 44% of the people he spoke to said their range anxiety was rare, and 69% said it usually occurred only when they're undertaking long journeys. I am not an EV driver, sorry guys, but I am absolutely desperate. I will let my car run until the very last drop. So I too get range anxiety in my diesel car because I never fill it. So like that
Yeah.
thing that you said, we're even before you even get into the climate change discussion of it, it's just really bad reporting in general. And then when I scroll down, what do I see in the middle of an article? An advertisement for Spirit Motor Group, which I went
yeah.
on to. I clicked the ad and I looked for electric cars, and the only thing they have are a few hybrid SUVs. So like, yeah, just the
Yeah.
kind of when you don't have, and I have only learned to look with that kind of lens at these articles because of listening to you, actually, Tom.
Yeah.
But if you don't have that knowledge, you would read that article with a completely different point of view and take in the way Neil Briscoe has framed it as that.
But I mean, it's
People are
it's
freaking
and
out
it's
about
buried.
SUVs.
I mean, it's fascinating because it's a negative headline, and then the subhead is 16% say they've been stranded with a flattened battery, but almost all say they'll buy another EV next,
Yeah.
which completely contradicts the negativity, and buried deep down in here somewhere, it says that 70% of people do most of their charging at home. And there was another story. Where was it, Tom? I think you maybe might have shared it about how the cost of charging an EV has doubled or something.
Yeah.
And they put on these ridiculous stats about driving from Cork to Dublin and blah blah, and it would cost you so much more than driving a car, a petrol car. And I think they took the highest charging network and use that as opposed to saying if you're driving from Cork to Dublin, most people will charge their car at home,
Yeah.
and then drive, which costs about €7 or €8,
It's
depending
this.
on your electricity.
So that story in particular was a press release from an energy switching company. So obviously they've got this vested interest, which is like, come and use our service. We're promoting this thing. And I contacted
Yeah,
Breaking News, I think it was, to say like, come on, lads, put some balance in here. Here's some
Yeah.
stats that might help. But we keep coming up against this thing. So like you've like already hit on all the key points. The balance is at the end. So you set up the negative, and at the very last bit you put, but someone else has said that that's not true. The issue is that these statements kind of hang in the air. So to your point, Anna, there was a study 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, Aston Gate, it became called. Aston Martin, McLaren, Bosch, a few others had come out with this report which like wildly exaggerated how much the emissions for creating an EV were, like how much the manufacturing ones were. And sort of this went everywhere. This spread like wildfire. Oh, EVs, they're terrible. Some amazing people went out there and actually tried to debunk this very quickly. The articles were never pulled. They're still up. The quotes from that misleading study, which was promoted by the wife of the PR guy from Aston Martin. It's a really fascinating story. If anyone's interested, I really recommend going and reading about Aston Gate. But these stats are still being quoted everywhere. That misinformation is out
that's
there.
the problem.
Yeah, and it just,
That's
you
the
can't
problem.
bring it back
Yeah.
in. So like until we have accountability from our journalists, until we have accountability from those publications themselves, which like, I spent the last few years talking to Deirdre McCarthy, who's the head of news and current affairs at RTE. They use PR to block it. You go in with a question of, here are specific examples of misinformation, and they come back and say, we take misinformation very seriously. Of course, we don't repeat it, which they are.
Yeah.
So I think all we can do is keep calling out and trying to, I think, never forget the power of conversations like this. If friends are repeating misinformation, you can call them out on it and
You can
try and do
challenge
it
them.
nicely. And
Yeah.
that has a huge
Don't
amount
call
of
them
power.
fools or idiots, because then they won't be your friends for very long. I know this. And then to your other point, Ciara, to your question about how do you combat this, Dave Robbins from DCU had a good opinion piece in The Independent about this. He's a communications expert, and his point was that the government or the people who are, say, promoting electric travel or promoting climate change actions, they need to be flooding the airwaves with positive stories and with positive messages, and it needs to be as memorable as range anxiety. So they need to be getting all the positive stories out there to combat it as well, which is not as easy as it sounds.
I mean, is it a surprise?
Tom, you had shared a good story with us about the pension schemes or the replacement of pension schemes in the UK with electric car parks. That sounded like a pretty good way to get people's attention.
Yeah, this was actually Anna's piece, I think.
Oh,
Yeah, I just came
excuse me.
across it when we were talking about EVs. So, you said earlier, Tom, about that in the UK, people are turning away from EVs based on no data at all. Turns out that company cars EVs are really, really popular as company cars, as a perk for employees. So, and that is, that's going up. So those numbers are going up. And so, it's like, it's another example of that wasn't widely shared, but it's another example that just shows the misinformation that Tom had been talking about
Yeah.
And
earlier.
both were in the Irish
And because,
Times, I think, too, which was like a really stark contrast. You have this piece by, I think it's Peter Campbell, who typically writes for the Financial Times, and it's this sort of,
Yeah,
it,
it is Financial Times piece. Yeah,
yeah, and it's in reportage. It's in like a reporting tone. This thing is happening here. Is this not an opinion tone? So it's a really
yeah.
interesting difference between these two pieces.
I want to give a shout out to that scheme because it does show the positive impacts when people actually make a change, just to counteract the 1/6 anxiety age range article or range driving rate, whatever it is. Anyway, so it says they were incentivizing people to opt for leasing EV cars. Is that correct to say?
yep,
And so they've given the example: someone had a gross salary of 35 grand a year, not like an absolutely insane salary. If they were spending £550 on their car, if they switched over to leasing the EV, there was this sort of tax incentive that would mean they would end up saving £180 per month compared to someone who was using their own kind of traditional car. And as an added benefit, there would also be kind of knock-on effects or knock-on savings for the government themselves, because they were not kind of giving out these grants for people to buy
yep.
them. So that's a really easy benefit to communicate to people. And I don't know if we are doing things like this in Ireland, but we should start looking at it. I don't know long term what like the actual benefit to that is, but it's still a story that should be highlighted, I think.
It's also a health story. Like one of the benefits of decarbonising transport is we can improve public health through cleaner air really quickly. Like
Yeah.
the number of people who die prematurely due to air pollution in Ireland is pretty shocking. We can stop that, or at least reduce those numbers pretty significantly. And I think one of the other things we should look at here is the accountability of the government. So um, EV grants aren't the only way to do it, but we don't have a second-hand EV market here in Ireland yet. They're still not
Yep.
lifting the import tariffs on used EVs from the UK, which would give us a supply of EVs that would be about half the price of the ones we can get here, which is hugely more affordable to people. And for me personally, I want people who are experiencing energy poverty to have access to EVs, because they then won't have to choose between their car and their heating in the winter. They can
Yep.
have both because of the savings that it's going to offer financially. RTDs, there
And
are no.
if you give them solar panels as well,
Yeah,
then that's even better.
yeah.
Yeah.
We are not looking at, like, Scotland had interest-free government loans that helped you get an EV, but there was also benefits in kind if you got solar. Like RTDs aren't supporting this because we don't have it. There are no TDs really that drive EVs. There were a handful
Excuse me, I know one that does.
that. There's a
He's
very
probably
small.
listening in his car right now.
There's a
Shout out
very
Michael
small
Healy-Rae.
handful.
Although he gives me range anxiety because he drives it on practically
He
empty.
gives me
So,
rage anxiety, I think, is the.
oh no, I'm not. I was talking about Michael Healy-Rae. He would give me rage
Yeah.
anxiety as well. But yeah,
Yeah, the TDs just don't care about this. They're not acting responsibly themselves, which means they don't care when the grants are cut. So we're just sort of at this political impasse. And again, it's about delaying action. And look, these are legally binding targets that we are going to miss. That will cost us millions in penalties for missing those targets. So it has
yep.
not only a health implication for us, not only are we not getting it, but for us, the taxpayers, we're going to pay money for their inaction.
Yeah. Kind of goes to show there is a good reason for the poor old scientists to be despondent, isn't there? Because
Well, there's still 6 years left. Maybe we will get there by 2030, Tom. Let's be optimistic. Okay, yeah, I know. Okay, well, maybe we should switch to our sort of good news story for this week. We'd like to always have a
come
good
on,
news
Anna,
story
let's
if
totally
we
frame it
can.
like the Let's just really exaggerate the goodness of this story.
Okay, so in good news this week, Ireland has stepped up to play a leadership role. And, it's not often I get to say those words. And the leadership role is in trying to get the EU nature restoration law across the line. Kevin O'Sullivan has reported on this in the Irish Times. So 11 European Union member states have signed up to a call led by Ireland to get that nature restoration law done.
Can you quickly, what is that nature restoration law?
Oh, it was it was a law that was debated for a long time and was watered down a lot in the process, but eventually got passed through the European Parliament, and is basically to protect nature on farmlands and so on. Farmers protested a lot about it.
Some farmers. Not all.
A lot of farmers in a lot of countries protested about it. But it's an attempt to try and protect what little biodiversity and nature we have left. So it eventually got passed. And then as soon as it got passed, almost several countries started to make noise about backtracking on it. Hungary being one that was very noticeable. So it's good news that we are stepping up and taking that on and providing some leadership in trying to get that across the line. So we are now one of, I think, did I say 11 member states that have done that, or 11 have joined us. So that's good. So let's take that as a positive, and hopefully the efforts are successful.
The joy in your voice is absolutely infectious.
Well, I'd prefer to say I'll come back when it's really good news and we've achieved it. But
Come on, Anna, give us a
at least it's some progress. No, woohoo.
Come on, Ireland.
We couldn't come up with any better good news stories this week, so I tried.
The positivity is palpable.
Yeah, really. Well, anybody else got any better good news stories? No. Okay, you're all gone very quiet. All right, let's look at some actions. Let's finish up by looking at some actions that we can recommend for people, because as we know, taking action makes us all feel better. So I'm going to start by saying I've been saying this every week and I'm going to keep saying it, there are elections coming up. There's local elections and there are European elections. Are you going to be a climate voter in those elections? And local elections in particular do have an impact because the councils can do a lot on a local level about climate. So Not Here, Not Anywhere has a local elections climate pledge. About 60, I think, the last time I looked, potential councillors have signed up to it. And they're encouraging candidates to be climate leaders, not climate culprits. If you check out their website, you can find an easy e-action to contact your own local candidates and ask them to step up for climate. So check that out, Not Here, Not Anywhere, and I'll put a link in the show notes.
That's an action for me to take. Actually, I'd love if there's anyone out there like me. So I need to get back into I have tapped out of pestering my local TDs and councillors. But now I'm stepping back into it, and that means I'm very confused and unsure of what to say to people. So I would love, actually, if anybody is in a similar situation who is got queries about how to approach it, to send in their messages to us on social media. And we can kind of figure it out together. I think that over the next few weeks, that's maybe something we should start talking about a little bit more, about how to get geared up for the TDs coming to our doors, because their leaflets are coming in the post box and they're annoying me. So I need to get ready to show that annoyance rather than just be like, oh, thank you for calling, goodbye.
Yeah, no, great point, Ciara. And the Not Here, Not Anywhere website does have some ideas on what to ask candidates to do. So take a look at that. Also, if you're in Dublin, if you're listening to this before Saturday and you're in Dublin, Garden of Remembrance, 1 p.m, national demonstration for Palestine. There's been a series of national demonstrations. They've been really well attended. So don't give up. It's time to keep marching and help end the ongoing Nakba. If you're not in Dublin, IPSC.ie, which is Irish Palestine Solidarity Campaign, has a list of emergency actions for Palestine around Ireland. And one particularly emotional one is in Dulach in County Mayo. They have an annual famine walk every year. And I was actually in Dulac last week, and it's the most beautiful, beautiful place. And the story is that people during the famine walked up there to try to find food, and hundreds of people died. And they've a plaque up there that just makes you cry because you just read it. But this year they are going to have their famine walk in solidarity with Palestine, which I think is just a lovely thing to do, and very,
Yeah.
very poignant given
That
the
is nice.
famine situation there as well. So
And if you're not in Dublin, there's similar solidarity marches in Limerick, Galway, Cork, wherever is local to you. If you can't get to Dublin, go where you can go, find that community. Same as your climate anxiety. If you're worried about the ongoing situation, the ongoing genocide in Palestine, then find your community, go and be with those people and feel like
yeah,
you're doing something.
Yeah,
it makes a
absolutely.
difference.
Mm.
It makes a difference.
Definitely. In the vein of actual events in relation to Palestine, Irish Artists for Palestine, last week we missed it because we weren't recording, but they ran an alternative Eurovision, which they're trying to raise 100k off the back of. So if you didn't catch it, you can still catch it on YouTube. We'll put the links to watch. There was events in Dublin and Galway with amazing artists from all around the country. So we'll put the link to rewatch that and the link to donate in the bio. And I also want to just give, this is one I mentioned a couple of weeks back, but I think it's a really nice event. There's an organisation called Street Feast. It's not really anything to do with the environment but also it is. Anyway, basically it's go to Street Feast. It shows you how to set up a little community gathering of your neighbours. Everybody brings food. It's really just nice to kind of get to know people who are around you. And again, like that, just tap into your local community. Open up a few discussions, dare I say it, about climate change, and see, do you find any neighbours that also are a little bit afraid? Talk to them about the scientists. What a great mood killer.
Yeah, on a sunny afternoon in your street feast, let's talk about doom and gloom. Yeah, they love you, Kira. But no, but it is a lovely
There's no better
community.
way to have hard conversations than around a plate of food, I think so.
But look, we need community. Community is what's important, and that's what Street Feast is all about. So, so that's great. And I kind of on our actions list, I said get out, and anybody getting out and doing anything.
Go and
Take
enjoy
off
the
all your
sun.
clothes.
Take off all your clothes.
Maybe both
Kira,
together.
No.
Yeah. At the Street Feast.
Yes, your neighbours will love that, Kira. Okay, I think this might be a good moment to wrap it up.
Oh, whatever.
So thank you, Tom, for joining us again. I'm sure we'll talk to you again soon. And Kira, as always, and I hope Dara makes his way across the Bay of Biscay and out the other side. We will be back again next week for more doom and gloom and fun and games. And in the meantime, you can buy us a coffee, as I said earlier, at buymeacoffee.com/The Climate Alarm. You can find us on all sorts of social media that I won't list here. And that's it from us for now.
OnlyFans.
No. Oh, why did I give you the last word, Kira? Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
The joy in your voice is absolutely infectious.